Hello, my Aloha tribe, and welcome to the Aloha Perspective, where you get a little bit of something and a whole lot of everything. Happy Thursday. It is Thursday. Trying to fix myself here. There we go. Sort of. Anyway, I have a memorial service to go to after we finish up here. So, which is not, it's kind of ironic for today's subject. It wasn't intentional, but it just happened to fit on this day. And then I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to a memorial because I had an appointment, but it got canceled. So now I can go. So yay. But anyways, well, not yay. I mean, not exactly the happiest, of circumstances, but it's always good to say goodbye to a loved one. But anyway, so today I'm waiting for some people to come on because my usuals, right? And older sibling had a tough time waking her up this morning, but Muddy and I were just talking, so I know she's there somewhere. Anybody? Bueller? Anyway, so my uncle is being interred in the same place as my mom. So I'm also going to go visit my mother. So, and what do you guys bring when you go to, when you go to visit loved ones? Do you bring anything? Do you, do the things? Good morning, beautiful girl. That's Muddy. Muddy's on. I think older sibling fell back asleep. But anyways, I bring my mom M&Ms, peanut M&Ms, because those were her favorite. And I always hope and that whoever cleans up at the end of the day when they remove stuff partakes in them, kind of like, I'm giving them to her and she's passing them on. So sometimes I bring flowers, but most of the time I don't, just because, it's just my thing. I think sometimes we bring flowers because we don't know what else to bring, or we don't, and it's like, I know she loved the M&Ms, so I like to sit them on top and whatnot. But today's subject, let's get rolling. So, do you believe in reincarnation? I don't know where this came from, because I do believe in reincarnation. According to one person, I had quite a significant lifetime, but I've also had some pretty sad ones. And there's the last set of my lives did not seem to end well. But what can I say, right? There are times when I've had memories about things, and one of them was so brutal. And it would have been right before, it would have happened about a year before I was even conceived. So who knows, right? But that one was a wild one. And I used to have those memories over and over and over. I mean, I would wake up crying. There'd be days when I would be afraid to go to sleep because I did not want to have this dream because it was so horrible. And, the details in them were so clear that I knew it could not be anything but a memory brought forward from, from there. So Sammy says, my loved ones are all in Virginia, so I don't visit. I don't blame you. I'll be honest with you right now, because I'm at my dad's. My mom's right up the freeway and I don't go, but I also feel like my mom visits me a lot, and I don't necessarily need to see a headstone to prove that. So, I love my mom, and it's not that I'm trying to disrespect her by not visiting her, but it's also still a little hard. I see it, I pass it, and I'm like, oh, I should stop. I'll stop on my way back. And then I don't, because it's just kind of like, no. So I think a lot of it too is just self-preservation. But anyways, reincarnation. So let's get rolling on this, because I am a teeny bit pressed for time. So reincarnation is the belief that some essential aspect of a person, often the soul or consciousness, survives death and is reborn in another body. It is central to Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, I don't know, and Sikhism, but appears in many traditions worldwide, from ancient Greek philosophy to indigenous beliefs. Most Abrahamic religions reject it, though smaller groups within Judaism, Christianity, and Islam have embraced versions of it. So my question is, versions of it? You're either reincarnated or not. So that one just kind of like, what do they mean by versions of it? So Muddy says that, oh, your mommy's on your mantle. I don't blame you. I think Sissy Joe is on her dad's mantle, so we're not able to visit her. But my dad kept my mom. My dad kept my mom for quite a few months before he, finally laid her to rest. So, and for me, again, I was bad. I regret it now, but I should have gone, and I didn't want to. Not because I didn't want to take the day off, but because I couldn't handle the fact that she had died, let alone watch my dad put her ashes into the ground, despite the fact that I actually had some of her ashes, right? So there was a finality there. But for some reason in my mind, it was just like, nope, nope. And I regret it, but I'm glad my dad did have people there. He had an aunt and uncle, one of my cousins who was like another daughter to my parents. So I'm grateful that he was not alone, because if he would have been, I would have gone anyway, but I couldn't bring myself to it. And I asked him if it was okay, and I made sure, and I'm not sure if he was ever okay with it, but he told me he was. So that was that. So the reincarnation, I'm not sure again how you can have or if you could embrace a version of it. So maybe they mean like the afterlife, or now I know in Hinduism it is a very sacred thing. I mean, like it is a very sacred thing. So anyways, I looked up a few things. Okay, I looked up a few stories. And I'm not going to go into deep detail of them. I do have the video of one of them, which I will put in the comments if I remember, because I'm going to do all this later. But yeah, it's always been a fascinating subject, and I don't know how these things end up in the algorithm on YouTube, but they do. So here's one fascinating one, and I'm kind of bummed that she's asleep. She didn't get to bed till like the wee hours of this morning, so poor older sibling. She's been having trouble sleeping. But older sibling was told by two independent psychics, two very different people, not associated with one another, that she was actually Harriet Tubman in one of her past lives. And I remember when she told me that, I'm like, oh my God, you were? And she's like, you know who she is? I'm like, yeah. And, you got to remember the time that older sibling was growing up, civil rights was still a big thing. And, a lot of Black history wasn't in the history books yet, including very strong women like Harriet Tubman. So by the time I came along and went to school, she was. So thank you, Dr. King, and, even Malcolm X and all those other civil rights people who fought to put this history in there. And it's still not very accurate history. We need to do better, people. But yeah, and so, and it's not something she just tells everybody, because sibling has blonde hair and blue eyes. And I think there are people out there who would be completely offended for her to say, well, I was Harriet Tubman in a past life. And I don't know why. I don't know why. But we did look at a picture of her, and they have very similar markings. And I think for Harriet, they may have been markings that were caused during her time in slavery, but for older sibling, they're just a part of her face. And so, which, of course, sends you down another rabbit hole when you start thinking. And I remember watching this one documentary years ago about this gentleman who was I think a captain. He was an officer in the Civil War. Not anybody famous that we'd ever heard of, but an officer in the Civil War. And in a battle, he had gotten sliced up here, like a sword slice, up his face. And this gentleman, when he was born, he had the same birthmark. It was a birthmark. It was just how he was born. But I can't remember how. I don't think it was ever on his radar. I don't think reincarnation was ever on his radar, but then somehow it came up. Or I think he saw a picture of the person, and so he started doing research and more research and research, and then he did like a regression, and it turns out he was that gentleman, and he was carrying that scar as a birthmark into this life. So a lot of times, if you have interesting lines on your face, or if you have a birthmark somewhere, it could be from a past life. It very well could be from a past life. Sammy says, Harriet Tubman, what a brave, inspirational woman. I agree. And like I said, this was told to her by two different independently people, and she was shocked. She was shocked, but it's also someone she had admired growing up. So, not that she was admiring herself, but, Harriet Tubman was a very strong and brave woman. And what's interesting about that too is Sibling does carry those characteristics. Now, she has a hard time fighting for herself, but if you step in the way of anybody she cares about, you better watch out, because Minnie Mo, that's what I call her, Mighty Mo, Mighty Minnie Mo, she's going to come at you like a tanker, all right, like a big Mack truck. So be careful, all right. You got to watch out for the small ones, because they're mighty. So, anyways, in this video was also Joan Grant. She's a British author, had a past life as an Egyptian priestess. She wrote several books and went into depth about the spiritual symbolism that created the pyramids. She had memories of how they would use levitation for the blocks. I mean, it was just this very spiritually high consciousness that built the built the pyramids. And if you look at them sometimes, it's, I don't think people really notice it, or maybe they do and just kind of blow it off, how a lot of the pyramids are aligned with certain, constellations. So, a lot of people think this is the aliens that built them. I'm not going to say it's not. I'm not going to say it is. All right. I don't want to take away from the people who did build it. So, or whoever built it. But she had a lot of these memories of being an Egyptian priestess, and and this isn't like I went to school and now I want to be this. This is, these are memories she had in childhood. I mean, childhood before school. And in fact, I think there might be a whole documentary on her, because her parents were like, no. And then I think she actually did end up going there and knew her way around. Or she was able to draw maps that, having never been there. I can't remember. I'm sorry. I thought I would remember all this, so I just wrote little snippets down, but I don't. So, I will try to remember to put the video in there. But it was so fascinating. It was so fascinating. So I will share, and think of it as you will. I'll share my story last, okay? But anyways, the next one is Luke Bird. He's a child. Well, I don't know if he's a child anymore, but at the time that this happened, obviously, he was a child. And about 2 years old, he started having these memories of being a baseball player. Now, you may have heard of him because his mother did write a book about it, The Boy Who Knew Too Much. And he, he started having these memories and like these, just these thoughts and everything. And it turns out Luke Bird was Lou Gehrig in his past life. And the kid loved baseball. I mean, he absolutely loved baseball anyways. And so it's almost like, yeah, you know what? Life took me out pretty young. So I'm going to come back and, hopefully this time healthy, right? So, I mean, healthy, because, in case, for those who know what ALS is, it used to be known as Lou Gehrig's disease, because that's what actually took his life. So, or ended his life, I should say. But his mom didn't believe him at first. She thought he was just being imaginative, until he started recounting details that that are too young for a child to remember or to even know. Okay. He was 2 years old when this first started, but yeah, so she was kind of just blowing him off until then. And then they started doing some research, and then these are things he could not have possibly have known. She didn't show him anything on Lou Gehrig. She didn't teach him anything on Lou Gehrig. I mean, when the younger people nowadays, I don't think they really are aware of these people unless you are an absolute baseball fan and you're raised by one. Like, I knew who these people were because my father is a baseball fanatic, but, and that was growing up, but a lot of people don't. You could be a baseball fan and you could be a fanatical baseball fan, but not everybody goes into depth that far back. So, and now, because it's ALS, or referred to as ALS, a lot of people, really kind of lose sight of who Lou Gehrig was. But he also did the famous Yankee speech, right? The luckiest man alive, or something like that. I can't remember. I'm sorry, my brain. All right, I'm gonna blame perimenopause for this, because I go through some serious brain fogs lately. But anyways, so Luke Bird was another one, and it was fascinating. Okay, because you're just kind of like, wow. I mean, to have a 2-year-old start recounting the life of somebody that, he's really too young to grasp who they are. I mean, I think kids are smart from the moment they can start walking. I mean, they're probably smart before that. They just can't verbalize yet, right? But, you watch them They're so observant. They look at everything. They watch everything. They hear everything. You know, older siblings' first words were a sentence. You know, and I was just, God, I wish she was awake right now. But yeah, her first words were an entire sentence. But pretty wild, right? But anyways, the next person was Bruce Whittier, and he apparently in a past life was Stefan Horowitz. Now, this one gets a little sad because Stefan Horowitz was a Jew in World War II. I know, you kind of see where that one's going. But anyways, so Bruce kept having these dreams about this pocket watch, this gold pocket watch. And I don't remember in the video if they made it clear who was the owner of this pocket watch, but he distinctly remembered the pocket watch. Let's see, there was a specific watch from his dream that he found at a nearby antique store. It had been owned by a German officer. Now, here's the thing. When it says owned by a German officer, I half wonder if it was owned by a German officer and it was just in Bruce's dreams because this is something, one of the last few things that he remembered seeing, or if it was something that was his and they took it from him, because that was not unusual for, you know, them to say, oh, well, you have this, I like it, it's mine. All right. Yeah, it was some dirty business back then. Super dirty business. But anyways, it is just fascinating how these things happen. Bruce decided to go to the antique store not far from his home, and he was explaining to this man, have you ever seen or heard of a watch like this? And he had a rendering. He had drawn a rendering of it from his dreams, the best that he could, and tried to really explain it. And the antique dealer in front of him is just kind of looking at him like he's got 50 heads, because it just so happened that he had that exact same watch. And it was, so this is why, in my personal opinion, I believe that it probably belonged to Mr. Horowitz and was taken off of his possession, or taken off of his person and made someone else's personal possession. So, because it could have been something that was handed down. It could have been something that was important to him, or a milestone even in his life. And unfortunately, he did go to Auschwitz, and he was murdered there. So, I'm not going to say died there, okay? Because people that died there were just straight up murdered. Even if they just died from starvation, you know, that's just slow murder in my eyes. So anyways, the next person, we have Barbara Carlin. Now, this is another interesting one that sadly ended at Auschwitz. When she was a little girl, she started claiming around the time that she could talk that she was Anne Frank. Her name is Barbara Carlin. She was born in Sweden. And, you know, and people are like, yeah, they kind of blew her off, right? They're just like, no, that's not possible, yada, yada, yada. And she didn't know about Anne Frank. When she went to school and found out that Anne Frank was a real person, she stopped talking about it because she's like, oh, I probably shouldn't be going around advertising that I'm this person because people are going to think I'm nuts. But when her and her family took a trip to Amsterdam, it's Amsterdam, right? And they visited the Anne Frank house. Now, this is the 60s now, okay? So not a lot of, you know, there's no videos or pictures that people put out there like they do now. Like you can go onto YouTube and somebody's done an entire tour of the Anne Frank house. So you can basically see the world from your bed, okay, or your computer or your chair. All right. But don't do that. Get out there and explore the world. But, at one point she asked, she's all, where are the pictures that used to be hanging on this wall? And they were the pictures of the celebrities and whatnot. And so, you know, and she was telling her parents, there's pictures that are missing here. And so her parents asked the curator, and they're all, oh, you know, like on the side, they're all, we had to take them down because tourists kept trying to steal them, you know, so now we're going to put them in a glass frame and put them back up there. But she had known that. And then, so there were a lot of things that she remembered, and the Anne Frank Foundation actually verified a lot of these things and said that she was the real deal. So there you go. She was born in the mid-50s, I believe 1955, somewhere in that area. So it would have been around 10 or 11 years since Anne Frank had passed. So what she didn't wait. She's just like, I'm coming right back. So the next one is Shanti Devi. This one was interesting. Okay, I can't remember. They actually didn't say what the promise was that she asked her husband to make, but she died during childbirth. And this is in the early 20th century. She died during childbirth. And when she got older and became an adult, she started saying, I know I'm this person. I know I'm this person. You know, it had been 7 years since she died. So her son would have been 7 at this point. And so word got out from the town she was in, which was, I think they said Merthyr. No, she died in Merthyr, I think it was called, but she lived in Delhi. And so, which is 140 miles away. So there's, you know, this is like the 20s when she was born. So by the time she, you know, was probably having these memories, it was either the late 30s or early 40s, or when it became really prominent. Because it sounds like when I was watching the video that she had memories, I mean, very early in childhood, that this was her life. And so word got out, and this gentleman comes, and so it's the husband of the woman who had died, and he's pretending to be his brother-in-law because he wants to trick her, because he thinks that she's full of crap, right? And so, you know, but she starts remembering everything of their life together. Even, you know, did you keep your promise to me? You know, and so eventually he invited her to the house, and she was able to meet the son that she never got to hold because she died during childbirth. So for me, that one just kind of hit me a little bit different, because it's like, you know, this woman, I think that's really all she wanted, was to make sure that her son was okay, and to make sure, you know, and just maybe to hold him, you know, to be able to hold him. And what a gift, right? Your mom dies in childbirth, but here you have her reincarnated, sure, in a different body, but there's that soul connection, you know? And speaking of soul connections, so this randomly ended up in my algorithm last night. It was these 2 little girls. One's an African American, one's like straight up blonde hair, blue eyes. And they are the best of friends. And there's a reason I'm saying this, okay? Because I don't think color should come in handy, or should come into play here. But they're the best of friends, and they call each other twins. All right, they call each other twins, and they try to, as often as they can, their moms indulge them and let them dress the same when they go to school. And it, you know, someone tried to shatter this image for these 2 little girls by saying that, you know, oh, well, you know, you can't be twins because, you know, you don't have the same color skin. And this is at a party when some kid said this to them. And the little girl just looked at him and she says, we're sisters of the soul. And I'm like, these 2 have either come to Earth as siblings from the other side to teach the world a lesson, or they were reincarnated twins. And I was just like, oh my God, they were so adorable. Just the 2 of them. And, you know, you did have the dominant personality, which I know in some cases there are twins. There is a dominant one. There is an alpha. Not always, but a lot of times there is that alpha that, you know, that just kind of leads the charge. But she's all like, well, can't you tell we're twins? We dress the same. We're the same height. You know, we're the same age. And their birthdays are almost the same day. They're just days apart of their birthdays. So it's just like, I love it. Teach the world a lesson, girls. And I'm sure they're older, you know, but I hope that their relationship always lasts. Because, I mean, you know, I had to go out and adopt my soul siblings. They almost had them at birth. So, speaking of soul siblings, hello, older sibling. And actually on the other side, she's really just one of my best friends, but we're like sisters anyway. She always looks after me. But, I already shared your Harriet Tubman story. I'm sorry. I got so excited it kind of came out first. So the next one, this one I found fascinating, and this is the one that kind of sent me down the rabbit hole of reincarnation. This was the first video I saw, and this little boy named Chase, and Chase was starting to have dreams that he was in a battle, and this started very early when he was able to start verbalizing and whatnot, and his mom didn't really understand what, was happening. Because, I mean, when you're a parent, you don't think that, oh, yeah, who was my child in my past life? You're just like, oh, this is my son, or my daughter, and I just love them, and yada, yada, yada. And then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, I had this dream that I was an African-American soldier in a war. And you're like, what? So you're like, I'm sorry, repeat that? And it turns out it was the Civil War. So Chase started having these dreams. And I'm going to read this to you. It says he had eczema on his wrist. And it turns out the soldier that he had been in his past life in the Civil War had been shot in the wrist and patched up and then sent back into action. Upon this discovery, his eczema cleared up and went away. And when he died in battle, and he was even able to draw what he saw, because he's all, yeah, I can see myself, he's like, I can see myself on the ground. I can see the battle from the air. So his spirit was leaving, but as his spirit was leaving, he was still taking note, and he drew an entire map of the whole battle area, which they were able to verify. He couldn't remember. I don't know if he ever knew who he was or if he had the name, but that, all the battles are generally listed. So it's just kind of like, wow, that's pretty wild. That's pretty wild. So, again, I talked about people that have birthmarks in certain areas, or people that have had, or scars, or just lines. Like we talked about older siblings. She has very similar lines to those of Harriet Tubman. And again, I don't know if Harriet's were because of life, or as a slave, life in general, or because she did do a lot of work on that Underground Railroad. So wherever they came from, they have very similar lines, and it's very, very interesting. It really is very, very interesting. So the question is, do any of you ever feel like you've had a past life? Have you ever felt that there was something missing? As I mentioned, the last one, the last memories I remember, and it only really happened when I was stressed, but there was no way I could possibly have known this. And, I've tried to find it in Google and whatnot, and I really don't know where to look. But there have been other times when I've been with older sibling and I've seen an area, like when we would take the train up to the hockey games, and I'd just be like, oh my God, that was in my dream, that area. Or I'll pass, something in a certain area in that same area, and I'll see a school. And this one in particular was pretty horrifying. I was being chased by a murderer, and he got me in the end. I tried to hide in the closet, and then all of a sudden, every single time the closet door opens, and there's just this guy standing there with this knife. And then that was it. I'd wake up because I knew, because it was coming down when I'd wake up. My mom, at one point I was visiting my parents, because this is how long, it was in my late 20s when I finally was able to move past this. My mom actually taught me indirectly how to have lucid dreams. She was just like, well, just the next time it happens, if you're able to, just start praying, which, its own way is lucid dreaming, because you are taking control of this dream. And so I did. And in the dream at the end, everything happened, but the end was different. And, I stopped having them. But there was very specific things, because I've always loved, Mustangs. And I always thought it was because my dad had one before I was born. But in my dream, very distinctly, there is a Mustang, and then there's a license plate on the back, and it has the year on there. Just fascinating. And I'm just like, and I haven't been able to prove it to this day, but I do find it interesting, because it's just like, it was in Los Angeles, and I've always really kind of felt connected to LA anyway. But yeah, so I don't know if it was just odd, because, we have lots of dreams, and I've always had vivid dreams. I've always dreamt in color, which I always thought everybody does. I'm pretty sure everybody does. I don't know who says people dream in black and white, but I don't know, because everybody I talk to say they dream in color. But I don't think it's something I could have made up. I don't think it's something that could have been driven into my head from my dad's shows, because if that were the case, the dream would change. But the dream was always the same until I started praying after talking to my mom the very last time that I had this dream. And then it was just done. Just done. But Muddy says, I think that some of these savant children who are born with the ability to do things, for example, play piano at concert hall level, are carrying that talent over from a former life. I agree. I 100% agree. Like these geniuses, right? And I think some of them are just prodigies. But yeah, but there's, I think some of them are just prodigies. I think some of them are just, but yeah, I never really thought about that. But that makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. You know, like I loved this in my last life and now I want to do it again, you know, and now it's a different era. There's a little African American boy. And the reason I'm bringing up his color is he is definitely a prodigy on the piano. But imagine if he had been this person in his past life. You know, maybe he was African American in his past life. There would have been a lot of doors closed to him, you know, or he would have had to just kind of, you know, like, oh yeah, you can play here, but you can't eat here and you can't sleep here. But now he's living in an era where he's just free to be him. He doesn't have, well, there are some limitations because of some people, because they're jackasses, but this little boy has more of an opportunity now than he did then to just be accepted across the board. Not because of his color, but because of his talent, you know, and people will just hopefully look at him and go, wow, you're amazing. You're a prodigy, you know? And yeah, I do think that that could be, you know, carried through in, from another life. That's fascinating. So the one I was actually going to share with you, and the only reason I brought the other life up was because it happened, that I mentioned it at the beginning. This one I struggle a little bit with because it has been verified by a seer, and it has been actually brought to my attention by a psychic and a medium, psychic medium. But I struggle with it a little bit because, you know, of who she was and the notoriety that goes with her name. And I can't say I've had a lot of memories. I've had some, and I had a lot when I was a kid, and me breaking out into a British accent when I was a child, really, you know, for no apparent reason ever, and wanting to live in England made perfect sense. But I was told about, let's see, 2012, about 14 years ago, on a trip to Arizona, Sedona, but we were in Jerome when this happened, that I was, you know, Mary Shelley in my past life. Now, when I went in to see Renee, because all of us went, and it was fascinating because she nailed it on so many things with us. Sissy Joe wouldn't really talk about anything that, you know, they did, but and there was a little bit of a struggle, but she sent her to somebody else because Sissy Joe could be very closed off. I love her, but she could be very closed off, and there were a lot of things she did not want to talk about, and that's understandable. So, you know, but she did go to somebody else who, you know, that was a friend of this person's, who just nailed it on the, you know, completely on the head. Now, the reason I'm saying this, that, you know, we went in just because when I went in, she just knew me as Shelley, and I was the last one to go. And the girls kept saying, well, Shelley this, Shelley that. It's very rare when people call me by my full name. But she looked at me and I said, no, that can't be possible, you know, because at the time, one of my guides was named Georgie. And she said, well, I feel like Georgie was a, you know, like she's all, he was well known in his own right, bit of a cad. And I didn't know much about Lord Byron at the time. Turns out he was. But yeah, apparently there was a big significant time in my life where he was sort of a guide. A bit misguided guide, but guide nonetheless. And so we talked about it, and I was like, no. She's like, well, don't you like to write? And I said, and I was just looking at her because she didn't know anything about me. I'm like, I love to write. I said, it's my passion. And she's all, well, why don't you put anything out there? And I said, because I don't think people will like it. I said, you know, I'd rather promote other people. I'd rather, you know, push forward their things. But she says, there's something in your name, though, that has made it very clear who you were in your past life. And I'm all, I just kind of looked at her, and she's like, what? And I'm all, and I spelled out my name for her. My first name, my full first name, not my middle name. It's my full first name is Shelley Marie. Now, in French, Marie is Mary. And, you know, and if you flip my name, it would actually be Marie Shelley or Mary Shelley. And because she said to me, she's all, you've been carrying this name your whole life. And she's all, this is what I'm seeing. And she's all, your name is Shelley, right? And I'm all like, yeah. And she's all, well, there it is. And I said, well, that's not the whole of it. And that's when I wrote it down for her. And she just kind of looked at me like, wow. And but kind of like with a mixture of wow, but also, how do you not know this? You know? And I'm just like, one of my spirit guides, and I'm not, I don't like to mention the whole name because I really think people would think I'm nuts, but even he's been verified as being my spirit guide. I'm just going to say that his name was Henry. All right. Henry's been with me my entire life, but he was also an author. And, when older siblings started helping me realize the gifts that I have and actually really kind of unpack them, because I had them when I was a child, but my Catholic mom made me put them in a box and shove them away because it's evil. But turns out it's not. And my mom and I did talk about this later, and she's like, I'm very sorry. She's like, I had no idea. And I said, well, when you're raised a certain way, it's not your fault, but I said, Laura's helping me with all this. And I said, it only comes from a good place. But doing some of my own past life regression, I found out that Henry has been with me since I was a child. And I'm pretty sure he's on vacation right now because, boy, I give this guy a run for his money. But, I mean, I don't know. Girls, what do you think? Should I share it? Because I know you guys know. And people I tell that are, that are metaphysically minded go like, well, why not? Even older sibling. Because here's the thing. When I first started understanding that I had a gift, we started watching these ghosty shows, right? And on the ghosty shows, they're always like, oh yeah, well, knock once for yes, or twice for no, or no, or whatever, knock however many times. And so before they redid our conference room, whenever the light would go out, because you're really still, it would just be pitch black. There were no windows in it yet. So, and it would be a couple years before they reconfigured it. But the light went out and I thought, well, all right, maybe this is just, embrace the fear and just ask. So I literally just kind of settled down, took a few breaths, calmed my nerves, and said, okay, spirit guide, what's your name? And so, we started with the alphabet, and I said, is your name in the, I just did the first 13, right? Like A through M. And I got a knock for yes. And I said, well, what is this, the second half? And I got a knock for yes. So I started going through the letters, and then I get an H. And so I'm like, and that was and I said, okay, well, your name starts with H. And I'm all, is it, I don't know, I was just being dumb. I mean, the first name that popped in my head was Henry. And I'm just kind of like, and so finally, it's like I said, well, is it Henry? And I shit you not, that knock was so loud that somebody outside of the conference room door had heard it and actually asked me, is everything okay in here? And I'm all like, yeah. And they're all, because they opened the door and the light came on. And I said, oh yeah, I was just relaxing in here, on my lunch break. And so I'm like, all right, fine. So then I said, well, I said, so what's your last name? And a friend of mine popped in my head. And I was all like, okay, is there a reason he popped in my head? And I got another loud knock, right? So I'm like, right. So I write this down. And I said, well, can I Google you? And I'm not kidding. It was like, just like, I think I was annoying the shit out of him. It's like, you know what? I'm putting all this shit in your head. You were seeing it in your head. Why are you questioning me by asking me stupid questions that make me have to knock? That's what it felt like, And so I Googled him. And nobody's replying. So if you guys don't tell me whether or not you think I should share this, I'm not going to share the last name. So, some of you may have figured it out already. But anyways, I was able to Google him. And, so anyways, I still had trouble believing it. Older siblings said, why? Why are you having trouble believing this? You love to write. You have a mentor who's a spirit guide who is helping you learn, who's helping you on this path. And I said, no, why me? I just didn't think very highly of myself. Okay. There was no thinking that I was cool enough to have someone like this be my spirit guide. And so anyways, we were going, and I've talked about this story before. We were going to see a medium that we loved. We were taking Sissy Joe for her first time. And on the way there, Sissy Joe made us late, so I let her drive my car, and she was driving like a maniac, so I was sitting in the back seat praying, and then all of a sudden it dawned on me, just like, please don't let her get into an accident, because I love this car. But, I don't mind. It's not that it's personal. So Muddy said that's up to you about sharing since it's so personal. It's not that it's personal. I just fear what people will think, and I really think that I shouldn't, because I really do think he does help my writing. And I really do think it's not so much in the sense that he gives me the ideas, but he gives me the confidence that I need to write. And like I said, this is somebody who's been with me since I was a child. I remember having an NDE, a near-death experience, when I had my heart surgery. And I remember somebody pulling me back. And it turns out when I did ask another psychic this, they're all, oh, somebody named Henry. And I'm like, oh, I always thought it was Jesus. But it turns out it wasn't. But because he just said to me in his very educated voice, it is not your time yet. He's all, no, little one, it is not your time yet. Which is interesting because I never told Sissy Joe that, but she called me little one a lot. And she was also very in tuned to the other side. So sometimes I think that was him talking through her or putting it in her head to remind me that, okay, everything's going to be okay. So anyways, on the way to see this medium, I was still in this place, and I was just kind of like sitting in the backseat going, all right, because he popped into my head, right? Because all I hear is, it'll be fine, she'll be fine. You're going to get scolded when you get there, but it'll be fine. And I said, you know what? I'm all, if you're real, prove it. Kind of like an asshole, right? Like, oh yeah, fine, prove it then. So we get there. We did get scolded because we were late, thanks to her. But, and I'm throwing her under the bus for that because she really didn't think it was that far. And we're like, Carl, this was a girl that ran on Hawaiian time. Okay. But, we get there and the first person he looks at after he's done his, after he gets us settled in, explains how this works and everything, is me. And he looks at me and he kind of cocks his eyebrow and he says, his spirit guide said that this person is a little annoyed by this question, but he looks at me and he says, do you know a Henry? And I just looked at older sibling and she kind of had a smirk on her face because I didn't tell her what my question was, but she had been trying to convince me that this was a person that is my spirit guide for all this time. Right. And so I'm all, yes. And I very, very mellow, very kind of like, tail between my legs. I'm all, yes, I do. And he says, stop questioning him. That's what he said. So stop questioning him and just, just accept the fact that he is your spirit guide. I'm all, okay. So anyways, all right, I'm going to share it. Henry James, because older siblings, right. Why do I care what other people think? That's none of my business. But it's Henry James. And I love Henry. I don't know a lot about his works. I remember seeing some of his books made into movies. I remember watching Notting Hill and hearing the name Henry James going, what the fuck is Henry James? And I kind of felt bad about that because it turns out this guy's been with me my whole life. But I don't know why. I don't understand if he just got saddled with me or if he chose to be my spirit guide or what. But there have been many a times when I do believe that it is his divine intervention that has stopped me from doing some of the things. I believe he's the one that just kind of nudged Bestie to call me and then didn't let the answering machine pick up, because that was the first time I was, going to, and so, and I can't explain the relationship but it's very fatherly, brotherly, friendly, sarcastic. Like, what the fuck are you thinking? I don't think he swore. I'm not sure that he cares for the fact that I do, but yeah. And I do on my desk have a picture of Henry when he was a bit younger, in his middle-aged years when he was really writing a lot of his stuff. But yeah, I think in a way it is very personal to me. And I get very defensive now when people try to say now. But I realize now that older siblings, right, what other people think of me doesn't matter. Because it is a very, very, I don't want to say personal relationship, because it's not like that, not like that. But it is very, like, having someone of that magnitude believe in what you can do, allows you to look at other people who trust you, who are actually, in the physical form saying, well, we believe in you, so what's the problem? And I don't think I really realized till right now how much Henry has impacted my life. I always thought the first book I ever write, I'm going to dedicate it to him because, you know, it's Henry James. How many people can say that Henry James is their spirit guide? Nobody. Some people might, and I do know that from time to time he pops out. You know, he doesn't, you know, he'll pop out for a while and go do his thing and yada, yada, yada. And, you know, but I know that I'm his main person to guide. I don't know how to put that. So anyways, that's my story. That's my story. Not a reincarnation story, except for the Mary Shelley part, which I guess I should embrace. I don't have a lot of memories anymore. I did when I was younger. I would dream a lot of that era, and I never could understand why. And I remember the first time I watched Frankenstein, it just didn't, you know, like the kind of, like the ideal was there, but it's kind of like, why does this feel wrong in some level? And I've never read Frankenstein. I'm going to be honest with you. Okay. You know, you guys know me. I love to buy books. I don't read them. I should, but I don't. Oh yeah. His main soul. I'm his main soul. That's right. But you know, like I said, I think he might pop in with other people, but kind of like, every so often, you know, I know that, oh God, why is her name escaping me now? It was one of his friends, Edith Wharton. Edith Wharton definitely has her own main soul, but I know from time to time she pops in with Henry for me. So maybe that's where Henry goes off to. You know, they all have their little circle on Earth. They all have their little circle up, you know, in the veil, and just kind of help each other out. But yeah. And, you know, and you can see how much I revere that, because I've known about Henry for about 20 years now. It was verified, actually more than that, more than 20 years, but it was verified probably, Henry just started out as an idea about 25 years ago, but he became more of a in your face kind of thing, probably in the early aughts, right? Sometime before 2010. And yeah, so to Henry, I dedicate this show to you, and to all the people out there who have had their past lives. I admire you. We have done some work to see other people that older sibling was in her past life, but I'd like her to do a regression before we announce those. So, but if you want to know, you can come to me and I will tell you. So, because this woman has lived a lot of strong lives, and it's just fascinating. So if any of you have stories, you know, please feel free to put them in the comments or share with me. I love the idea of reincarnation, not because it gives us a second chance, but because I don't think we just die. I think we come back to learn lessons we need to learn so that we can finally move on and live peacefully in the veil, whatever that entails, however it looks to you over there. I'll just call it the veil. Okay. So I hope everybody has a wonderful, wonderful day. Please, please, please take care of yourselves. I got a jam. I didn't think the show would be this long because I didn't think I'd talk about Henry that long. And I know it wasn't reincarnation that we were talking about, but maybe we should cover, you know, like spirit guides and soul guides and guardian angels, because I really do believe that Henry is my guardian angel. I really do. I think he has kept me out of a lot of situations that could have turned bad. I think he has kept me out of, you know, like, I'll just give you an example. One day I was driving to see a boyfriend. I was just got in my car. So I was probably about 20, I was in my early 20s. And I wasn't paying attention and the light turned green. And I was just sitting there and, you know, and I don't know why, because I mean, I always paid attention because I'm in downtown. And this van comes, you know, he had the green light. So he was just going. And while he's doing it, he's honking at me because the light's green, but he was in his own lane. And next thing I know, just as I'm about to put my foot on the gas pedal, that guy got nailed by a guy who ran a red light. And I thought, oh my God, if that had been me, because the light, as he was coming towards the light, he wasn't slowing down. He was still going, and the light it was all in a split second. I probably sat at that green light for a few seconds. But like I said, I wasn't paying attention, and all of a sudden it's like, bam. And that guy was in a van. I was in a small car. That could have done some serious damage. So anyways, I'm not going to try to convince you to believe anything. It's up to you. Everybody gets to make their own choices, right? And older siblings, right? What other people think of me is none of my business. So to Henry, thank you. I salute you, Henry. And thank you for choosing me. Okay. I hope everybody has a wonderful, wonderful day. I'll see you back here on Monday, 8:30 a.m. Pacific time, Facebook Live. All lives are public under Shelley Marie Lucas. Anybody can watch. I started out at YouTube. If they're not too long, they go on to TikTok and then across the board. I still can't upload to Instagram, so I apologize for that. But if you are here or on Threads, you will see it. So anyways, again, have a wonderful, wonderful day, everybody. Girls, thank you so much for popping on. Thank you for sharing. It doesn't matter if you had a famous past life or not. If there were things that you have dreamt about, if there are things that have bothered you, this is the life to do your best to fix those things so that you can move forward. And that way it becomes a choice, in my opinion. This is just my opinion. I think we're sent back until we finally heal everything that's healed. And then I think we get a choice. I think we get a choice after that. Like, you can come back for a vacation life. And maybe that's what some of those people are. You know, some of these people who are living high on the hog, right? They're just, maybe they came back for their vacation life. But if they don't take care of people, they're coming back for another one. So anyways, have a great day, everybody. And again, thank you so much for watching. Have a safe and wonderful weekend.